It's very challenging, even today, with all the information that's available, to, with confidence, strength, and dignity, embrace your authentic self in contrast to your sex assignment at birth, regardless male or female, and move forward with who you were destined to be, with or without the support of those around you. Do your research, find peers, mentors, support organizations, and make sure that the information you're accessing is from credible sources. Dispel the myths, dispel the hyperbole, dispel the pathological assumptions, and ignore the political, geopolitical arrogance, because they're pursuing agendas to suit their ideological perspective of what life should be for everyone, with no desire to learn and understand the biology, the physiology of gender diversity, its origin, its development, and the fact that we've been around for thousands of years. It does not take a lot of research.
What do you really know about people who are born transgender? Have you ever met someone who's transgender? Well, if you're like me, you're curious but hesitant to ask questions. Well, welcome to Demystifying the Transgender Journey. In our conversations with people who were born transgender, their families, friends, and the professionals who support them, we ask probing questions and discover insightful and educational answers. You can also find more information on our website, thetransgenderjourney.com. Now let's get right into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Demystifying the Transgender Journey. I'm one of your hosts, Lynn Murphy. I am an author and speaker and trainer and founder of Women Who Push the Limits. I also published a best-selling book, 50 Life Lessons from Inspiring Women. And your other co-host today is the remarkable Wendy Cole, who is a transition mentor, and she helps people through significant changes because she transitioned at 67. And if you don't think that's significant change, there's nothing that compares, I'm sure. Our goal here is to interview people who are born transgender, interview their families, friends, coworkers, healthcare workers, and by sharing their stories, these powerful stories, we want you to be able to meet people who are in the community and to help dissuade people from all these misinformation and disinformation posts on news and social media. We're humanizing the transgender experience, one fantastic story at a time. And today we have the honor of welcoming a truly amazing guest. And I'm going to read this because she has quite a resume. Dr. Diana Sorrentino, PhD, is a nationally recognized authority on gender diversity and transgender identity. Dr. Sorrentino is the author of several influential books, including, I have this here, which is just amazing. This one is Transgender Families, Helping Parents and Families Understand Gender Diversity and Being Transgender. And another book is The Neurobiology and Physiology of Incongruent Gender Identities and Sexual Orientations. She also co-authored Adolescent Gender-Affirming Medical Behavioral Healthcare, making her a leading voice in the intersection of science, medicine, and lived experience as an affirmed woman. With dual doctoral degrees in sociology and psychology, Dr. Sorrentino brings a rare depth of academic rigor to her work. For more than 35 years, she has dedicated herself to counseling, mentoring, and supporting gender diverse and transgender individuals, as well as their families. But her impact doesn't stop there. She also trains and supports medical and behavioral health care professionals, equipping them with knowledge and skills to deliver affirming care. And what an open market it is for that. They are very much needed. Dr. Sorrentino's experience and expertise is sought out far and wide. She's designed and delivered educational programs for thousands of professionals, spoken in countless conferences and symposiums, and hosted a podcast that reaches listeners in over 80 countries. We're jealous. We want ours to be there. Her work is rooted in empowerment, advocacy, and awareness, empowering parents, families, and professionals with the tools to support transgender youth, advocating for accessible and tailored healthcare, and fostering communities that embrace gender diversity. With over 40 years of research and more than 1,000 educational seminars under her belt. Dr. Sorrentino is not just an expert. She's a tireless champion for understanding, acceptance, and change. Now, it is my great privilege to welcome Dr. Diana Sorrentino to our show.
Lynn, Wendy, thank you. It is truly an honor to be here to join the two of you and your listeners at large. And I am more than confident that in a relatively short period of time, your podcast will trump mine as far as the number of countries with subscribers.
Well, we will support yours, and we know you will support ours, and we're trying to get the message out to humanize the transgender experience. And really appreciate you being here, Dr. D.
Again, my
Thank you
honor.
for being here, definitely.
So you have such an extensive resume and such an amazing life. And we'd like to start today with your personal life. I know we're already planning to do a second interview and probably a third, where we're going to get more into Dr. D's research. But today we want to see who this person is up close and personal, who has such an amazing life and has done so many incredible things. So Dr. D, would you share with us a little bit about your childhood, your family, your upbringing?
Well, I was raised in a traditional Irish Italian Catholic family, middle child between an older sister and a younger sister. And what I'll share is during my prepubescent childhood, I always felt different. Could not explain it, did not feel as if I was a different gender than my sex assignment at birth. I just felt different. We had a neighborhood full of children about the same age. And for whatever reason, I never clicked with the boys in the neighborhood, but I always got along well with the girls. Okay, so that was my prepubescent childhood. When puberty hit, it was like a tsunami of emotion for me. Whatever I was feeling became significantly more intense, and it really struck home starting 6th grade as I returned from summer vacation, seeing all the girls in my class maturing and becoming women. And it's like, well, how come I'm not?
Mhm.
At the time, I had no knowledge of gender diversity or transgender identities, or for that matter, who to speak to. My
Mhm.
parents, I wouldn't even know where to begin. Now, to put a date on this, we're talking 1966 here. That's when I entered 6th grade. The only thing you heard about at that time was Christine Jorgensen, who
Exactly.
originally became a media darling, and then, as the media will typically do things, they turn on her. But she opened the doors for so many individuals who were closeted about their gender identity that there was hope. And Dr. Harry Benjamin is the quintessential expert during his time in
Mhm.
this realm of gender attribution and transgender issues. Now, of course, I did not know all of this then. So I struggled a lot. It was emotionally heavy on me during my adolescence. And again, who do you talk to? Where do you go for information? And what is very typical of individuals like myself assigned male at birth to pursue hyper masculine activities to effectively repress and suppress the feelings,
Mhm.
which I learned over time only works for a short period of time, which is why after undergraduate school, I went into the military. But I was constantly looking for information, for resources,
Mhm.
coming up empty. During one of my graduate studies, because I have 3 master's degrees, I'm searching through the library at the university, and I found a book where within the book they referenced a support group for not so much transgender, but cross dressers, you know, individuals who would live part-time in an alternate gender. I went, wow, this is fascinating. So I reached out to the local group. The name of the group was TRI-S, the Society for the Second Self. It was founded by Virginia Prince out of California, who was a real pioneer in her own right in the gender community. Well, I needed to be interviewed. I needed to have a background check completed because they weren't just going to let anyone into one of their functions. Well, having been cleared, I was informed that they hold their meeting at a local hotel where they rent one of the meeting rooms. So I decided, okay, because I was living part-time in FEM when I could during that period. I checked into a room, put myself together, went down in full feminine presentation, and was shocked that there were 40 people at the meeting. 35 men dressed as women and 5 women dressed as men. I was blown away. And my first reaction was, God, I'm not the only crazy person in the world. And sharing conversations during that first meeting, and I became a regular month after month after month. The conversations I had with the other individuals, it was like reliving my own initial journey because we all followed the exact same path, very little deviation. Well, that group led me to a second group, somewhat larger, and ultimately to a third support group, very diverse. And during an outing, a long weekend in New York City, there was a presentation by Dr. Jeffrey Mechanic, MD, an endocrinologist who was working with the community. He was fresh out of his residency, started his private practice with his father-in-law, Dr. Footerwhite, who had been working with the gender diverse and transgender LGBTQ community for like 30 plus years. And it was thanks to Dr. Mechanic that the floodgates of information and ultimately knowledge opened. And I became insatiable in looking for information. He did his work as far as my physical and blood work to start me on feminizing hormones, very detailed process. And I started planning for my transition, which took place 5 years following my initial contact and appointment with Dr. Mechanic. So here I am in 1990, ready to pull the trigger and initiate my official transformation, which I prefer to consider my life's evolution, not necessarily just a transition. My parents were still alive, so I went to myself, okay, I need to have a conversation with them to see how they're going to respond and react to this. I already had determined who friends and family were going to be accepting and those who would be rejecting. But beyond that, I was ready for anything. Took my mother out to dinner, Irish Catholic, explained everything to her and what was going to be taking place because I was ready with my social and legal affirmation. And over dessert, she looked at me and said, this fits. This makes perfect sense. And of course, I was stunned. And I sat there and looked at her and said, what God's name are you talking about? She said, I always knew you were different. I couldn't tell why. I did not know why. I just knew you were different. This fits. This is a perfect fit for you. Well, I cannot tell you what a relief that was.
I bet that felt so great, Dr. D.
Oh, words cannot begin to describe it.
What year was that approximately?
It was actually 1989.
Wow.
All right. Now, time to tell Dad. So Mom and I took Dad out to dinner. He's Italian Catholic. Figure if Vesuvius is going to erupt, it's going to be less likely to occur in a public place, or at least minimize it. Shared everything with him that I shared with my mom. He sat and listened intently. And when I was all done, he asked me 3 questions. Am I happy? Yes. Am I healthy? Yes. Am I under good medical care? Yes. He took a deep breath, let out a huge sigh, and said, this is going to be an adjustment. So be patient with me and give me time to adapt. Well, Mom and I both almost fell out of our chairs. To have their support.
Did you think you were going to have their support?
No,
No?
I was ready to be an outcast. Okay?
Because of their religious,
Well,
their culture.
pretty much the religious. And my father was a blue collar, hardworking, high school and tech school educated man with a very narrow worldview, other than serving in the army in World War II. So I was ready for the worst. I fortunately ended up with the best.
That's great.
So off I went. Mom and I would go out, whether it's to dinner, shopping, wherever, as mother-daughter. And of course, I would be in the appropriate full femme garb. When I came to the house or we were going out with Dad, I would dress a little bit more androgynously to kind of ease him into the new presence. And he was wonderful. There was only one thing he just couldn't get his head around, was my name. He always called me Diane, not Diana. So I said, you know what? I can live with that.
Well, it's close enough. At least he's not calling you your dead name.
True. My older sister, who was 6 years my senior, who I was never really close to, like overnight we bonded like never before. My younger sister, who was 3 years my junior, threw me out with the bathwater. She wanted nothing to do with me whatsoever. Well, we were never close either. So basically, I didn't care. The last time I had any direct contact with her, being out of necessity, was my father's funeral in 2011. I have no idea where she's living, what she's doing. I haven't heard from her. And as far as I'm concerned, that is perfectly okay. I have a new self-constructed family that I have built. Many of my personal and professional friends took a hiatus and disappeared. Others hung in there, but that's the norm. But this is one of the very critical aspects of helping people through their affirmation process, Wendy, is being prepared in advance for the eventuality. Too many individuals, whether adolescents or adult, will rush into their formal legal and social affirmations without adequate planning or an appreciation of what to expect. So I was off and running at that point. 1990, January was the official mark where the butterfly evolved out of the cocoon and off I went. And I truly dedicated a significant portion of my time to research, study, writing, training, and working with the community, especially with the parents of individuals who are transitioning. Now, what was the norm at that time is we would transition, my life's evolution, and we would get on with our lives in our affirmed gender, be it affirmed male or be it affirmed female. We didn't wear it on our sleeve. We didn't wave the pride flag or the transgender flag. Our goal was to step out into society, personally and professionally, as a woman, do my work, interact, and get on with my life that I was supposed to have. And this is an important step because you need to put the foot forward with confidence, with poise, with grace. And even if you may look a little different to someone, it's not going to be an issue.
No.
And if someone misgenders me, I just ignored it. Because if you acknowledge it, you're reinforcing that, oh, there's something different here. And from then on, it just continued.
Can we step back into your childhood for a minute? Let me ask you a couple questions there.
Sure.
Fascinating story, Dr. D. When you were growing up, one of three children, Roman Catholic, Italian, Irish, I'm just picturing this whole family dynamic. What do you remember seeing or hearing in your childhood that gave you an impression of how your parents or your siblings might have accepted that there's something different about you?
I really do not have an answer to that question because while I felt different, I had no comprehension or even a basic understanding as to why I was feeling different.
Do you think they treated you differently? Did they make comments about other people that they saw who were different? Is there
No,
any of that?
none whatsoever. Remember, we're talking the 60s here.
So people weren't aware of all this.
It was the furthest thing from anyone's mind or conversation, other than a few, hey, have you heard about Christine Jorgensen?
Exactly
Who
that.
came back and, the now blonde bombshell and so on and so forth. That was it. It was a novelty, but it was not part of the everyday conversation as we experience so much today.
Yeah.
And one of the things too that you said was the lack of information. I told my parents in 1958 that I was a girl, and they threatened to commit me, and I had to start repressing all of this. But information, even when I got to college, there was none. I can totally relate to everything that you just said about that too.
Yeah.
And no concept of why I felt this way. I just did.
Yeah. See, unlike in your situation, I was not at the point where I can say that I was a girl and not a boy. I just knew I was different.
Well, when did you start? You knew you were different, and then you kind of jumped to cross-dressing and going to triple S, to the conferences, to the meetings. How did that kind of evolve? What did you do to cope with this difference? And when did you start doing the cross-dressing and doing some things that made you feel that?
What was the year that you went to your first support group meeting too? I was curious about that.
It was probably around 1981, 1982.
Okay.
Now,
Wow.
what is very common for someone who initiates cross-dressing, specifically assigned male at birth, is they will access whatever undergarments within the family may be available that could fit them. And I did that as well. And then when I was in a position to start ordering things online, I did that too. And then, of course, getting videos on skincare, makeup, all the basics.
Did you have someone who you were modeling your life after, or someone who was a mentor or a coach in those early years?
I had no one.
So you were figuring this all out on your own.
It was 100% on my own until I met the support group Tri-S, which helped launch so much because individuals there had been cross-dressing for years. And that organization, the individuals were not on a path to gender affirmation. They were quite content living their life once a month or in short outings as their alternative gender. And there was a lot I learned from them. So
Did you ever consider staying in that world and not transitioning? Or once you've discovered them and got more comfortable and accepted yourself, you started to evolve?
well, as I indicated, Tri-S led me to group 2, which then I learned about group 3. And it was meeting so many other diverse individuals because group 3 was a real hodgepodge. You had the transgender, you had the gender fluid, you had the cross dressers, and whatever mix in between that you could envision, they were there. And the more time I spent in public as a female, the more comfortable it became. I mean, I was living in New Jersey at the time, and in total femme presentation, I would think nothing of jumping on the train, going into Manhattan and spending the night or the evening in Manhattan, having a gay old time. It just reached a point because I was seeing Dr. Mechanic every 6 months after the first couple of years of being in every 3 months for my hormone therapy and medical tests, that I even shared with him, I said, this is who I am. I mean, this is so comfortable, where the other side of me, based on my assignment at birth, was not fitting anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So the planning started, and that's when I decided, okay, January 1990 is going to be the official date and time. Take care of a few things in advance of that, and off I went.
So you had quite a few years of living mostly in a man's body,
Full lives, yeah.
dual lives. So you went in the military. What were some of the other things you did to compensate and to cope with the feelings that you were having, with the lives that you were trying to live?
Well, my early days in the military, I was able to so fully repress and suppress the feelings that it was no longer an issue, but it's a pressure cooker,
Mm-hmm.
There have to be consequences to that.
definitely. And you cannot keep it locked up permanently, not without emotional, psychological, and physiological complications.
Absolutely.
And then while my stint in the military, I was never outed. As my career there was progressing, I also knew that I could hit a dead end in a heartbeat if the wrong people learned about who I am. So that just accelerated my decision to move on and become the woman I was destined to be.
How long were you in the military? And it was active military, not reserve.
About 10 years.
Oh, 10 years. Okay. And what was your role?
I was an intelligence officer.
Of course, you're using that brain of yours. Yes, that does make sense. The psychology, the sociology, that all
Yeah.
fits, doesn't it?
It does. And I can say thank you very much to the military for writing the checks for those degrees.
Yes, that's a good thing, isn't it?
It is.
And you gave back in spades, I'm sure. So, anything else you did to compensate or even overcompensate?
Nothing particular. It's just that until I found the support group, you know, I really thought there was something wrong with me psychologically, which provided me the strength to continue repressing and suppressing the feelings. I said, this is not normal, until I learned that it is very normal, because we are born this way,
Exactly.
which is why I love Lady Gaga's Born This Way.
Yeah, isn't that great?
I
Mhm.
love that song. I love that song.
So you were in the field of psychology and sociology. What kind of inner work did you have to do to get to the point in 1990 that you said, line in the sand, this is where you're going to evolve?
Coming to a realization through a stronger understanding of the neurobiology, physiology, and the developmental factors before I was even born, which made me the woman that I am. Right? And Dr. Mechanic was a key player in this journey of life and evolution because, well, let me just digress for a moment. You know, I work with the parents of adolescents who are transitioning. And many times they're in a panic because they do not understand what's going on. Some of them recognize the changes in their child's behavior during prepubescence, others don't. But when I've had an opportunity to sit down with mom and dad and go through the details of the neurobiology, the physiology, the variant genes, hormonal developments, and how fetuses evolve, which we'll get into detail, I'm sure, in a later episode, from the default female value, the XY, into the masculinized brain or the complications where the brain does not become masculinized. When they have some level of understanding foundationally, it doesn't ease all of their anxieties, but at least it begins to make it tangible for them. Like, oh, this is not some ghost in the room. So it's the beginning of their understanding how their prepubescent child or adolescent is now presenting a gender identity, which is different from their sex assigned at birth. And the next challenge comes for the parents is helping them deal with the extended family, their friends, their social networks, their employment, their professional life, because that's something else they're not prepared for.
Right. And this all flies in the face of socialization from birth.
Yes.
For everyone.
Yeah.
So for you, a lot of that inner work had to do with the logical side of it, of understanding it. And do you find that that really helps the parents?
It helps the parents because aside from dealing with the factual side of it, I'm a walking testament to the experience, and I share with them my life's evolution. It's not a one-time sit down and, oh, everything is now great, but it's a starting point. I provide them with reference and reading material. They will receive a copy of my book, Transgender Families, because that is written specifically for parents and families to better understand what is taking place and what the process is.
And that's one of the reasons we wanted to have that other interview with you to go over that, because to hear the things on the news and social media and from people who are in power, that there are two genders and that's it, and that's all there will ever be. And
it's
no
sex assigned at birth based on your anatomy.
No scientific background to what they're saying, and yet so many people in society are believing that.
Well, what else do they have to believe until they're provided with factual information that totally contradicts the political arrogance that's coming forward? And what also the average person does not understand is that globally, nations and cultures throughout the world do not conflate sex and gender the way they do in Western Europe and the Americas.
Right.
You know, when the 16th and 17th century European settlers came to the North American continent, they were shocked by two things that they saw. One, when they encountered the indigenous tribes, they spoke English. The other was they had individuals in very influential roles, shamans, tribal leaders, who were gender fluid or transgender. If you look at the 570 federally recognized indigenous tribes here in the United States, that's still a very important part of their culture. Yes. Even the 200 tribes that are not federally recognized. This is nothing new. It's been going around for thousands of years. It's been a part of humanity. And you look at the continent of India, they have a Hijra population. Over 3 million individuals assigned male at birth who live as females. Bangladesh established a mosque for the Hijra population in their societies. And the list goes on. This is nothing new. And when I share all this in my seminars or when I'm working with parents, I mean, the eyes become the size of grapefruits. And it's like, well, we had no idea. I said, well, how could you? When all you hear are myths, hyperbole, pathological assumptions, and political arrogance, none of which have any basis in fact.
Right. Well, and I don't believe everybody is totally closed-minded. I think what you're saying is that they just have not been exposed to this information. They don't think to look for it. They don't know where to look for it, like some of your experience in your early life. Yeah. So, how do they know?
Well, let's go back to the 60s and 70s and the late 50s with the gay and lesbian movement.
Same thing.
How many decades did it take before it became more mainstream, more commonplace, and in many circles, all the more acceptable? We're at that point where they were 40, 50 years ago.
Exactly. I was told in 1971 when I tried the transition that this was psychological, no treatment, no cure, by a psychiatrist in front of a group of psychiatrists.
Oh, yeah.
And gay people had the same diagnosis until 1973.
Well, what's interesting about the DSM-1, and now the DSM-5 TR, the classifications are not based on clinical or scientific research. The classifications are based on consensus of opinion by the psychiatrists in the committees that work on that segment. And for the gay and lesbian community, it took years to remove the pathology and the stigma. Now, we went from gender identity disorder to gender dysphoria, which is not perfect. However, being removed as a disorder was a step in the right direction. And I share with folks the reason for the dysphoria classification is that insurance companies need a diagnosis in order to offer coverage.
That goes back to our healthcare system.
All right. So it's not a stigma
Mm-hmm.
because when I relocated to Pennsylvania and traveling to Manhattan to see Dr. Mechanic was no longer convenient, especially post-COVID, I sought out a local primary care physician to take over my healthcare and my medication. So I looked through the directories, found a woman, listed LGBTQ+, blah, 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 in her profile. So I chose her. I had a very good first appointment with her. She was more than willing to take over the prescription management as well as the medical profiling. And when I returned home and I read the chart, because through the Epic system, the web portal, I can see everything. Her diagnosis was gender dysphoria. Well, I wrote her a 2-page note. And I said, tell me where there is dysphoria.
You're a woman. What's the question?
Precisely. I said, for 32 years, this is who I am. There is no dysphoria. I said, you cannot use that as a diagnosis. So we spoke, and she said, would it be acceptable if I used previous gender dysphoria in childhood? Yeah, you could use that because that's appropriate. She's been wonderful. Okay. And she has a copy of my book. She texts and emails me with questions because she has a family practice, things surface. I've been seeing her now 3 years. She's wonderful.
You've educated her.
And that was a way around the medical system.
Yeah. So my gynecologist, because I do want to have an exam once a year, even though I do not have a cervix. She was fascinated when I was in for my first appointment.
Mm-hmm.
I have a cardiologist because when I turned 70, I figured, maybe it's time to just make sure everything's well. And that was prior to, in December, ending up with what they call a supraventricular tachycardia event caused by atrial ventricular nodal reentrant tachycardia, where out of nowhere my heart rate decided to peak at about 187. So off to the emergency department, overnight in the hospital, echocardiogram, stress tests, the works. The staff could not have been better. The physicians, the nurses, the aides, and they would come in because it's in my chart that I'm an affirmed woman. And they would come in with questions, intelligent questions. And this month, I will be doing a program for the physicians during their grand rounds.
Wow.
Wonderful.
That's absolutely amazing. Wonderful.
Continue to educate. Thank you. That is so important for them to meet someone and to see you're human. You have human needs. The human should not have that much of a heart rate. There are issues there.
Well, fortunately, I've had no problems since, but I have to acknowledge too, when a doctor first walked into the examining room and said, "Hi, my name is Dr. So-and-so. Very pleased to meet you. I am Dr. Sorrentino." It changes the dynamic immediately.
Mm-hmm.
But for those who cannot or do not have the ability to flaunt a higher level degree, be professional. Present yourself appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
Be the woman or be the man you were destined to be with confidence, with dignity, with poise. You won't have a problem. I mean, even when I was admitted to the floor, it was an intermediate coronary unit. Right? The nurses would come in and go, "Can I ask you a question?" And they were intelligent questions.
Look,
When they're intelligent questions, I will answer anything they ask.
when you're
And
being your
that's
congruent self and you're showing that, and so you don't give people anything to question. This is who
Right.
you are, and it's wonderful.
that's so important, to be open with people when you have that opportunity to be so, and be safe doing it, and talk with them. It makes all the difference in the world. That's what I found out during my first week of living full time.
There are two major hospital systems in the area where I live. The other one, I received a call asking if I would be willing to come in and do a program for their medical residents who are going into family practice, because they knew that there was going to be sooner or later a time when, whether it's a prepubescent child, an adolescent, or even an adult, would be coming into their panel with gender dysphoria or gender incongruent presentations or issues. So I was invited in. I did a 2-hour program for 40 medical residents. And again, another foot in the door.
Mhm. After I had my surgery at NYU, I volunteered at the medical school as a practice patient for the third year medical students. And I had a blast doing that.
Yeah,
It was fun.
it's
And
educational, it's fun, and it reaffirms also who we are.
mhm. And my surgeon also had surgery classes for all the patients that were coming in the next quarter. They'd fill up an auditorium, they'd bring family members, all of that. And I'd be on stage with 2 or 3 other post-op patients answering questions. And that was so empowering personally. And I learned so much about what people didn't know coming into that situation, even within our own community.
Well, this gets also back to what you're doing, Wendy, is you're becoming a mentor to so many individuals, helping them through the process. I do very much the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
because working with a gender diverse or transgender individual today requires an interdisciplinary team of professionals.
Exactly.
You can have the primary care physician, the endocrinologist, the surgeon. You might have an otolaryngologist to help with the voice. There are so many critical people, the psychologist, but the individual, the affirmed individual who can work with the individual and their families, the one with the life experience, is
Mm-hmm.
the cog in the wheel that holds it all together.
I agree. And that's been my experience doing this.
Diana, you've worked with so many people. Can you share just a couple of stories, anonymously, of course, about things that you've seen change, how people have changed, some of the success stories that you've seen with people you've worked with?
Well, on the negative side of the coin, I've seen too many adolescents that were rejected and expelled from their household.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And the reality is, from my perspective, it has nothing to do with the adolescent's gender affirmation to a gender that's different from their sex assignment at birth. It has everything to do with the parent or parents, plural, refusal to accept it because of their fear of how it's going to impact their life. And I've run into that a lot because when the parents are willing to meet with me, of course, I give them the background, neurobiology, physiology, variant genes, etc. And then I pause and I'll look at them and ask, okay, what are your fears? Beyond your concerns for your child or adolescent, what are your fears? What are your concerns?
What do they tell you?
Worries from, my child is dying. I said, no, your child is coming out of the cocoon as a beautiful monarch butterfly. This is a natural progression. The challenge parents will run into is if with the assigned male at birth, especially if dad is a business owner, from the day that child pops out, the life is planned. And this is going to be my business partner. And when that assigned male at birth becomes female, all that is gone.
Well, why couldn't the female be the business partner? I mean, there's part of the socialization there too.
Right? There's nothing to prevent that, but the mindset is so different.
It is.
Exactly.
But also, the male child typically has a stronger bond to the father, and the female child has a typically stronger bond to the mother. It's been documented that once they transition, that dynamic shifts, where the assigned male at birth who transitions to female now gets closer to mom, and the assigned female at birth who transitioned to male now gets closer to dad. So it's an adjustment. But the other part of the fear is, what am I going to tell my family? What am I going to tell my friends and social networks? Are they going to reject me? Are they going to criticize me? Are they going to report me to child services? I mean, it's amazing how their mind can swirl with so much negative thought.
I've seen it all too.
And my work comes down to building their strength, building their acceptance, building their knowledge to deal with the fears that they perceive.
And what happens in your experience when they don't accept their child?
It's traumatic for the child, for the adolescent, and make a point here. I always differentiate prepubescence from adolescent because the prepubescent child is not eligible for any form of medical or surgical intervention until the onset of puberty. And even with the onset of puberty, it doesn't happen overnight. Puberty blockers, gonadotropin-releasing hormone agonists, are used to put a pause button on the developing sex characteristics that would be associated with their sex assignment at birth, essential for the assigned female at birth. Cross-sex gender-affirming hormones would not even begin to be introduced until 15 or 16. Now, for girls, assigned female at birth, 10 to 12, is puberty. For boys, 12 to 14. So it's a pause button. And it's reversible. If it turns out that this is not the path for them, it's discontinued and puberty kicks back in. But the psychologist is involved, the endocrinologist is involved, the family physician is involved, the mentor is typically involved at this point to help guide everyone through the process. If appropriate, cross-sex hormones, 15 or 16, surgery, vaginoplasty for the assigned male at birth after age 18. I have a family I'm working with right now. The mother is supporting their assigned male at birth who wants to transition to female. The father, they're divorced, is putting up roadblocks and barricades every place he can to prevent it. And the individual entering puberty was panicking about all the secondary sex characteristics, the deepening of the voice, the growth of the Adam's apple, facial hair. So what I shared with the mom and the individual, listen, not being able to go on puberty blockers at age 11 or 12 is not the end of the world. Age 18, puberty is still in development. You can intervene then with medicalization, whether it's aldactone as a testosterone blocker, estradiol. If your voice is deepened, there's a relatively new process where under anesthesia, they can go in through the mouth and shorten the vocal cords to raise the pitch. Electrolysis can take care of facial hair, but again, it's not fully developed by 18. So it'll be inconvenient, but it's not a dead end. I mean, look at the number of individuals like Wendy and myself who transitioned as adults, you know, well past pubertal development. And things we had to do to put ourselves together as we wanted to be. Okay. Now, I was very fortunate. I had somewhat of a baby face ever since day one. But these are concerns that parents and the individuals have. And again, like this one parent, the father, it's more about him than it is about their emerging adolescent. He has no solid relationship with any of his other biological children, you know, one of whom has recently been diagnosed as being bipolar. And it was like, okay, time to reject him as well. So, you know, this is what you're dealing with. We agreed to meet with me back in the early part of the year with the mother. They've been divorced for almost 12 years. And I shared all what I would normally do with the first meeting. He refuses to meet with me again because he knows what's going to come, and nothing he wants to stand on is going to be supported. So that's a little bit of the digressive history.
Well, and you talked when we spoke the other day too, and you've seen statistics. You've studied suicide rates. What do you see as far as suicidal ideation in young people and the people that you work with?
Adolescents, particularly, who are not supported by their families, have a suicidal ideation rate as high as 70%. 70%, 70.
That's horrible.
And I've often thought too, at one of the times where I actually thought of suicide, if I had done it, no one would know why, because I wasn't out. And families are not going to make that visible. So I bet the statistics are even higher than 70%.
Well, as far as ideation is concerned, no, I think it's around that 65, 70% plus or minus. The attempted suicide rate can be as high as 40% for that
Right.
population. The death by suicide rate is almost 20%.
That we know of.
Yeah, and not always known that that was the reason for the death by suicide. Now, what's interesting, and the statistics bear this out, are the adolescents, incongruent gender identity, who are supported by their family, their parents. Their suicidal ideation rate is lower than their cisgender peers.
Exactly. Because they're happy.
They're accepted.
Happy, they're supported,
Yep.
they're encouraged, they're loved. I think in one of the documents I shared with you in advance of our chatting today was the negative impact of adverse childhood experiences. And those experiences will continue into adolescence. Kaiser Permanente worked with the CDC to do their study back in the 90s. They were looking at age groups up to 18 years of age. And the long-term physiological, psychological, emotional impact is lifelong, especially the physiological.
Stays with them, doesn't it? Yeah, it's so sad. So
one adverse childhood experience can increase depression in an individual by 50%. 4 or more can increase it to over 200%.
So keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much for what you're doing. And there are ripple effects. I'm sure it takes a while.
It certainly does.
I'd like to ask you some personal questions.
Go
Just-
ahead, ask what you would like. I might plead the fifth, but otherwise go for it.
No deflecting on this one, Dr. D. How is life as an affirmed woman full-time different than your expectations?
It's not. That's the crazy part of it.
Isn't that cool?
Once I adopted my female identity full-time, legally and socially, it was like, why did I wait so long?
And how old were you at that time?
I was 35, January of 1990.
How did you feel about giving up male privilege, or did that even enter your thinking?
Never even entered my mind.
I never considered it a privilege.
Well, the other thing too is my career actually was enhanced professionally following my affirmation because I was no longer living two lives. I was not confused or still somewhat depressed or anxious about being found out. It was like, why did I wait so long?
Yeah. So what surprises you about your life?
Surprises me
Yeah.
that I've been as successful as I have been. You know, my new family that I've built through friends and colleagues. Okay. I've had the opportunities you mentioned during my introduction about doing seminars and presentations at universities, at hospitals, civics groups. I mean, it just, I allowed myself to be my true self.
What a gift.
Yeah. Took a while, but I got there.
And so many people cannot say that, Dr. D.
Yeah.
Whether they're cisgender or transgender. I wish we had more people who could say that same thing.
Yeah. And for me, having opportunity to be involved with such diverse support groups just aided significantly in my comfort level and coming to the realization, of course, of my endocrinologist, Dr. Mechanic, that this is who I am.
You know, I hold a spiritual belief that things happen the way they're supposed to happen, that we kind of come in with a purpose and eventually work that way. Is there anything in your faith or in your beliefs that they're like that or counter to that?
Well, nothing particular that countered that. By the time I was finished with grammar school, kindergarten through eighth grade, with instructors, all the teachers were Dominican nuns.
Okay.
When high school came around, my parents wanted me to go to a Catholic high school. I said no, because the local city where I lived, the high school was in walking distances. Why do I need to take 2 or 3 buses a day to get to and from school when I can walk around the block? And I did that route, which basically put the religious aspect of my life not even on hold. It was like I threw it away.
So it was more a logistical decision than it was rejecting any sort of.
Yeah. Well, it was logistical.
Yeah.
It worked out.
So what unexpected lessons have you had in your life?
That's a good question. I mean, unexpected lessons, I could not identify them as such because life is full of so many lessons that are unexpected. And whether in my current role, my current life as an affirmed woman or before, I mean, there's nothing that really stands out.
Not just one, huh?
Not just one.
Okay. Well, then let me ask you this. You're visible, you're out there all the time, you're meeting people. Do you get any blowback from that?
Well, let me share this example with you. Several years ago, I was invited to deliver the keynote address for LGBTQ History Month at Hope College in Holland, Michigan. And I accepted the invitation. Well, while I was out there in preparation for the evening, it was like, oh, by the way, we would like to record this and put it on YouTube. And my initial response internally was, ah, because some people would say I was living a stealthy life because I wasn't wearing it on my sleeve.
Mhm.
And it's like, do I really want to do this? They said, we'll give you a bonus on your honorarium if you do this. So I thought about it and said, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time for me to come out of the closet per se, even though I was never closeted. So we had a discussion, and I said, I will agree to you putting it on YouTube with the caveat, if I receive 1 ounce of blowback, because the majority of my professional work, which sustains me financially, is corporate. The other work is more returning to the community. I said, 1 ounce of blowback, you pull the video. And that was the agreement. It was planning to run for 1 year only. It ran for the full year, not a scrap of blowback.
Mhm.
The positive feedback the college received from the alumni was overwhelmingly positive. And Hope College is a Christian university.
Mhm.
So, Margot, who was the organizer who scheduled me to come out, she goes, Dr. D, people need to hear your voice. You have to be heard. And she was the boot in the butt that got me moving. That's why
Mhm.
she is dedicated in the acknowledgments in my book. After that program, my phone started ringing for additional programs in other institutions and locations. And to this day, I've had 0 blowback. Now, I did have a client, a corporate client in the Midwest, who eventually found out that I was an affirmed woman. And being in a redneck, super red state, uh, well, it was the last time I did any work for them. I mean, they wouldn't respond to my phone calls afterwards. There was other work they wanted me to do. So I went, all right. I was sort of expecting it, but it was a good gig while it lasted. But other than that, I mean, no problems. Personally, professionally, on the street, in my travels, vacations.
Mm. That's wonderful. So being a human being who's transgender, how does that influence your thoughts and your feelings about what it's like to be human?
Well, I don't consider myself trans. I'm a woman.
Right.
My mind has been a woman since the day I was born. It just took me
Mhm.
35 years to get her to realize who she was and make the shift so that everything was congruent.
Mhm. I like to say it as we've become who we've always been.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Unknown quote. My problem is not that I was born transgender. My problem is I was not born a woman.
Hmm.
Well, you really were born a woman, just you had a different costume you were wearing,
Yes.
a different facade.
Yes.
We're close to winding up now, Dr. D, and this has been fabulous. I'm still looking forward to having another or 2 or 3. What would you like our audience to know? What's one last piece of wisdom that you can share with our audience?
It's very challenging, even today, with all the information that's available, to, with confidence, strength, and dignity, embrace your authentic self in contrast to your sex assignment at birth, regardless male or female, and move forward with who you were destined to be, with or without the support of those around you. Do your research, find peers, mentors, support organizations, and make sure that the information you're accessing is from credible sources. Dispel the myths, dispel the hyperbole, dispel the pathological assumptions, and ignore the geopolitical arrogance. because they're pursuing agendas to suit their ideological perspective of what life should be for everyone, with no desire to learn and understand the biology, the physiology of gender diversity, its origin, its development, and the fact that we've been around for thousands of years. Does not take a lot of research.
But people are lazy and they don't.
Right.
It's
You know,
easier to read.
well, how often have you heard the phrase, people read headlines, not articles? And if you
Mhm.
read the article, you'll come to the realization that the headline, you ask, well, what does the headline got to do with the article?
Yeah, it's clickbait. You've got to have some word in it that grabs people's attention that really has nothing in the article.
Exactly.
I've very much enjoyed our conversation today, and I find it absolutely amazing that you actually started in 1985 and did Affirm in 1990. In hindsight, I wish I'd done that too, but I had the full trauma of 1971 and my parents threatening to commit me. And that's what just drove me back into the closet, as it were, until 2014 when I found out that everything had changed.
Yeah.
And once I did that and found that out, I was able to transition in 6 months. I agree with you completely. This feeling of living authentically is absolutely the best experience of my entire life. It also physiologically improved the hell out of my health.
This gets back to the impact of stress
Mm-hmm.
and the negative impact. That is the reason why I wrote the book, Neurobiology, Physiology of Incongruent Gender Identities and Sexual Orientation. It's a biology book. It's a graduate
Right.
biology book on the intricacies, the complexities of different sexual orientations and gender identities, but also the impact on this body at large.
Mm-hmm.
And in my book, Adolescent Gender Affirming Medical and Behavioral Healthcare, who I had the privilege of having Dr. Christine Hardigan write the foreword for it, because she works extensively with the community, primarily adolescents,
Mm-hmm.
is to get into the details of how to process the affirmation. And there's an entire chapter, 30 some odd pages, which will probably be closer to 70 pages in the book, just on adverse childhood experiences and the
Mm-hmm.
long-term impact that that has on an individual.
This has been fascinating today, and I love your approach. I love that you're out there sharing who you are and sharing this research and making it accessible to people. That's what we need to do, is keep educating.
Well, one thing I've learned over the years, even before my formal affirmation, because in my previous role, I did quite a bit of training. What I'm getting at is the more research I've done, the more training I do, I learn more than my students.
That's always the way it happens, isn't it?
Okay? So for me, that's my selfish motive, is it builds my knowledge
Mm-hmm.
and then ultimately my value and credibility when I do a program. I mean, you've had an opportunity to see some of the supplemental chapters from my other two books. You were kind enough to purchase a copy of Transgender Families, and that's broken down into 6 parts. The first 3 deal with the biology, the physiology, the emotional, the psychology for parents, the foundational aspect of the history of gender diverse transgender, kind of like building the foundation. The latter 3 parts, part 4 is dealing with the prepubescent child. And it's the shortest chapter in the book because there's really nothing to talk about unless the prepubescent child has behavioral issues. Then you bring them to a child psychologist who's experienced in early development. The largest chapter is the fifth part. I think there's 11 chapters there on adolescent emergence, and then a condensed chapter for the adults. But what makes it really valuable too are the appendices, recommended reading, website hot links, organizations, supports, definitions to support the parents and families.
There is so much there. I just got it the other day, so I've only just skimmed through it, but it's so comprehensive, Bethany, and thank you for putting that out there. I hope more people will go looking for that, and we will put that link below.
It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, even the local bookstores, if they do not have it, can get it for them. Just to put it in perspective, the three different books, Transgender Families came in at 110,000 words. Publishers do not want to know about how many pages. They want to know how many words. So that book was 110,000 words.
And it's over 300 pages.
365.
Yeah.
The second book, Neurobiology Physiology, came in at 158,000 words. The third book came in at 260,000 words.
Oh, goodness. That's why you say it's more of a biology textbook, isn't it?
Well, the second book is a biology textbook. The third book, Adolescent Gender Affirming Medical Behavioral, is a graduate level book for those medical and behavioral healthcare professionals. But while it has a lot of technical jargon, it's all in the definitions and there are links. So all of the resources that I use, the citations are listed. Just like there's citations in Transgender Family, but not as extensive.
Well, we will put the link in the show notes and make sure everybody can find those. I can't wait to get into this. It's going to help me with the research that I've been doing, and I have a stack of books like crazy, but yeah, it's going to help. Thank you very much.
What has been so gratifying is with all the different programs that I've been invited to speak to, I bring copies of the books and they sell, but more importantly, the number of mothers who will approach me at the end of the program to say, I purchased your book. Oh my God, it was so helpful. It just warms my heart. Well, that's why I wrote it.
You're making a difference.
A big difference.
Do you want to share out your contact information?
Okay. You can find me on LinkedIn under Dr. Diana Sorrentino. I have a very large profile there, and I periodically will post information, podcast release, other tidbits of information periodically. My website is paradoxesofgender.com. If you go to Google and just put in Dr. Diana Sorrentino, PhD, this all comes up.
Right.
I mean, it's amazing how many pages when you are in Google, when you just put my name into the search string.
We're certainly glad that you shared your time with us and shared your talent with us, and we're looking forward to the next one.
Well, as I shared when we opened the program, it's truly a privilege and an honor for me to spend some quality time with the two of you, the important work that you're doing, allowing me to share my experiences in this segment, in the future segments, which again, I look forward to participating, getting into the knowledge of how we became who we are. Because once you understand the origin, then putting the pieces together becomes so much easier. That was the case for me.
Yeah, that it sounds to me like that led to the self-acceptance and the joy that you're feeling in your life. It's once you were able to understand that this wasn't just something that was wrong with you.
And I have never for a moment regretted the move. I just regret that it took me so long. But we're dealing with time frame where There was no internet. This was not something that was readily available. Had I not met Dr. Mechanic after being involved with the different support groups, it may have been deferred even longer.
Mm-hmm.
Wendy,
That was one of the things that I always bring up is that one of the big differences between today and anything in the last century, there was no information. It was very difficult to find anything, and we didn't walk around with computers in our pockets called cell phones attached to the internet. That didn't exist. As a 10-year-old, I was so easy to gaslight. Oh, you're the only one who ever feels like this. What was I going to say?
Well, how else can a parent or someone else who does not understand force you into repression and suppression by telling you that you are the only nutcase in the world that feels this way?
Yep. And you've got to hide this big secret.
I've worked with individuals from the mid-20s. I think the oldest person I worked with was 65, like yourself, who transitioned that late in life. And for them, it was just a matter of putting a period at the end of the sentence and completing a journey that was just deferred too long.
Mm-hmm.
that's a wonderful way of saying that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this. And let's thank our audience today for joining us and spending this time with us today on Demystifying the Transgender Journey. We had a great conversation with Dr. Diana Sorrentino today, and we will have more conversations in the future. If you haven't seen our previous podcasts or YouTube videos, be sure to find those under thetransgenderjourney.com. I've been your host today, Lynn Murphy, and your other host is Wendy Cole. We will see you next time. Be sure to like, share, subscribe. Make sure that you've got notification that we're on the air and that you can find our next and previous podcasts. And remember the motto of Women Who Push the Limits, which I think definitely applies to Dr. D. Find your voice, speak your truth, and change the world. And Dr. D, you're doing that. You're changing the world for people. So thank you. So until next time, remember to stay curious and stay kind. And we will see you on the next one. Thank you for joining us today on this episode of Demystifying the Transgender Journey. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode of our fascinating interviews. You can also find more information on our website, thetransgenderjourney.com. So until next time, stay curious and stay kind.